Hello and welcome to the Longev Lens. Please join my co-host, Dr. Sebastian Pedersen and I as we cut through the noise and hype around longevity, health and wellness and turn the latest evidence into honest, practical insight for living better for longer.
And just a quick disclaimer before we dive in, this podcast is for educational purposes only and doesn't constitute medical advice. If you have a healthcare problem, please consult your doctor or qualified healthcare professional.
Welcome back to the Longev Lens, where we cut through the noise and hype. And today our big topic will be based on gut health. This is episode number 5, so we're really excited to start getting a bit more of a roll on with all these sort of things. Gut health is obviously a huge topic. And in terms of newer actionable research, it is quite an early one, as opposed to a lot of other research within the field. So there's certain things with this topic I'd like probably a lot of your opinions on as well. I know you've had certain gut issues too, but we'd like to also cut through, obviously we want to go through as much evidence-based information as we can, but also I'd love to hear more your opinions based on this gut health as well. So what is the gut?
Yep, thank you, Corey. So I think the gut is the digestive tract very much from the mouth to the end, but usually what we're referring to when we're referring to the gut is the small and especially the large intestine, where you have the gut microbiome. So the microbiome, as a word itself, is pretty much all the bacteria on your body. A lot of them are in your gut. So the gut microbiome is all the bugs, so bacteria in the gut that help with digestion, help improve immunity, help regulate inflammation. And thus, as we're learning now, exactly as you said, and the way I think about the gut at the moment is there's still a lot more art than there is science, or there's definitely a good ratio of both when assessing and also improving overall gut health and the gut health's effect on long-term health span.
So what makes a good, healthy gut environment versus what makes it an unhealthy gut environment?
Yeah, I mean, the basics, if we're trying to use some key metrics you want to use, is you have a very broad diversity in terms of the gut microbiome, the gut barrier wall, so the lining between the inside of the gut, the inside of the gut and your actual inside of your body, because your gut although it feels as though it's inside your body, it's actually not. It's just a passageway where things from the gut get absorbed into your body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, and so they're making sure that that lining wall is intact, making sure there's no issues with inflammation. I mentioned immunity, mentioned also production of short-chain fatty acids, which help protect the gut lining. So there's so many metrics that we're now picking up on that we're actually interpreting and thus making actionable or addressing when improving people's overall gut health. But at the moment, when people think, what is a healthy gut? They often just think, I'm eating well, I'm pooing well, I'm not having any bloating, but there's so much more to just that.
Okay. And so you touched on bloating again. Is bloating actually a sign of a poor digestive health, or is it a sign of foods that maybe shouldn't be eating, or what's actually happening?
Yeah, and I think that's something I could definitely improve, and I think all of us as health professionals could improve on educating our patients and also the general public on the impact of bloating. So bloating itself is just the uncomfortable sensation of gas within the digestive tract. That can be related to medical conditions, but most often it's a functional condition. So what that means is the gas that's present is caused by, it depends on what you eat, how much of it you're eating, and what time you're eating it during the day. And why that's important is a lot of the functional, like irritable bowel syndrome, which is becoming more and more popular, the main issue there is bloating, or as well as diarrhea and constipation. But bloating is often the one that impacts your quality of life significantly because it's very uncomfortable and it can impact you every day. So to manage things like that, you have the FODMAP diet, which was actually researched and created right here in Australia at Monash Uni in Victoria, which stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, monosaccharides, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols.
You've done well there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. FODMAP. So what it just means is it's short-chain carbohydrates that are rapidly absorbed by the bacteria, causing gas, causing distension, causing discomfort.
Okay.
And why that's important is with people who have bloating and you've ruled out other causes or more sinister causes of bloating, then you'd go on a low FODMAP diet, So a diet that eliminates all these rapidly digestible carbohydrates to lower the gas production. And then what you do after you go on this elimination diet is you then gradually introduce one food group after another to find, okay, which food group is it actually I'm reacting to? Because people just think that it's all of their food they're reacting to, but it may just be, one or two ingredients, especially some of the higher FODMAP products that are causing your symptoms. And one thing I often see, or too often see, is FODMAP is not supposed to be a long-term exclusion diet. It's supposed to be a diet that gives you more information about what foods you tolerate and what foods you're more sensitive to. So after you've been in a low FODMAP diet, your bloating has resolved, or at least reduced, then introduce one of these food groups at a time to make sure you can reintroduce as much diversity in your food, in your meal plan as much as possible, so that you're just eliminating the one or two ingredients or the few ingredients that are causing you issues. And then with those ingredients that cause you issues, it may just be that you were eating too much of it. So you just have to reduce the amount or the frequency you're having these food groups.
So what are some examples of high FODMAP foods?
Yep. So high, you have your dairies. You could have your beans, your lentils, your apples, leeks, onions. So it includes both fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and grain, so wheat. And then low FODMAP is usually things like quinoa. You can have your carrots, your spinach. So there is, it's what I found based on, if you just look at what or think about those things I said, it's not necessarily easy to detect what's high, what's low. So
they all have different types of fibres in there as well.
Exactly. So I do recommend people have a look. And I know I haven't looked in a while actually, but I know the FODMAP group out of Monash, you have actually created an app. So you can search, and it's quite user friendly.
Yep.
It's a blue, white, black logo where you can just search by certain food groups, and it tells you low, moderate, high, and if it's high, what very low doses are usually acceptable. So to help you provide you some nutritional guidance.
You also mentioned before that it's not necessarily about making a perfect gut environment, because everyone will have their own individual variances. So what is it more diversity that should be aimed for with the gut microbiome as well?
I think, diversity is definitely key. I mean, fibres obviously is super important. So we talked about prebiotics previously and fibre, but what we probably could have discussed there to answer your question is fibre is important, but don't just focus on one fibre. You've got to make sure you have a diversity of fibres in your diet, but also diversity of foods, which usually that itself, diversity of fibre, diversity of foods in a mostly plant-based diet, will result in improvements in your gut microbiome, especially when all the testing that I do and we've seen, those behaviors or those choices, especially food choices, have the biggest impact on overall gut health. And when I do see people who've had eating a broad range of fibres, broad range of food products, they usually have very little issues when we actually test their gut microbiome, despite them having some symptoms that we need to assess through other means. But the actual gut itself is intact and usually in quite good order.
It seems like almost a bit of a catch-22, because, like you say, the plant-based fibres are giving a good microbiome.
Yep.
But they might also be sometimes like a high FODMAP type of food, which increases discomfort and bloating and all that sort of stuff as well. And
that's exactly right. And I've seen that probably a little bit too often in terms of people get really motivated and we say, you have this issue, we increase your fibre, but when I speak about fibre, people often double their fibre overnight. And they're like, it's really causing me discomfort. Then they stop and they go back to what they're on previously. But the important thing here, a good example is if you're using one common prebiotic fibre that I use or prescribe is inulin. Inulin can be a little bit moderate to high on the FODMAP diet. So you start with like half a teaspoon. So very, very little. And you'd only want to increase by another quarter of a teaspoon every couple of weeks. Like that's very, very small dosing, yet you're actually titrating it up and very slowly. Whereas people often take a whole tablespoon and increase from 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons. It's a massive impact. Even though the volume is still small, it's just 1 tablespoon, it's still much, much bigger than where we need to start.
Is that an insoluble fibre?
That's a soluble fibre.
Okay.
And it's relatively super cheap as well, which is why one of the ones that we use the most.
What's the purpose of the inulin?
Yeah, so what we use the inulin for is, so when we do for the right people at the right time who are indicated to have, or where it's appropriate to do a gut microbiome test, then we detect either imbalances, we detect significant disproportionate, so certain very high species of bacteria of one certain type of groups and very low in other key groups. And what we want to do is we want to rebalance that. So ultimately what we're doing is we're trying to refuel or give more fuel to the gut micro, to the bacteria we want more of in the gut.
Okay.
To give them more food to use, and thus if they have more food to use, they're more likely to be more become a bit more present within the gut microbiome.
If we're just talking about like bloating and gut discomfort or like intolerant sensitivities, would like the medically indicated testing be advised as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, because I often think people think you need a gut microbiome test to fix their gut. But the gut is so broad, there could be so many other things going on where it's important that the gut microbiome test is sort of the end of the road, I would say. So people comes to you, or people come to us or to see their own doctors, and they have fatigue, or they have anemia, or they have constipation, diarrhea, bloating, or they just have a constellation of symptoms. Then there's sort of a hierarchy of tests you'd want to do. Like one common thing is testing for, especially if they have a family history, is a celiac disease. So like an autoimmune condition for where they can't tolerate gluten. Then you have, because then by just purely removing gluten from that diet, they have a significant improvement in their health, and it doesn't impact their health long term. Then you would have pancreatic function. So the pancreas produces a whole variety of enzymes, which helps break down proteins, carbohydrates, fats. If your pancreas isn't working good enough and isn't producing these enzymes well enough, then you're not digesting your food. So again, it leads to these symptoms: fatigue, malabsorption, frothy stools. You can have allergy testing as well. And people often ask me, well, why am I getting an allergy test? Well, often and we can probably talk about that. There's a whole variety of different allergy tests as well. People can often buy some on the internet, which are IgG allergy tests, or so-called allergy tests. Whereas if you're really testing for allergy testing, you really want to test the IgE, so the protein that's involved in facilitating an allergic response. So people often, I think it's one of the direct-to-consumer blood pathology companies, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they sell all their products as allergy testing, where it's IgG, so it's actually not clinically as relevant as doing an IgE test, which is what we predominantly focus on.
Okay.
People come to us and they say, I have an allergic, I think I'm a sensitive or allergic to this food. Then we'd want to test that, because that can have impact on their overall health span, that can impact low-grade inflammation, and also significantly impact their quality of life.
So is there a difference between an allergy and a sensitivity or intolerance?
Yep. So allergy could be a life-threatening immune-mediated response, whereas a sensitivity is more like
if someone has anaphylaxis.
Yeah, exactly right. And then it's the panel that we use, we're testing for different types of pets, from grasses to nuts to seeds to fruits, vegetables, dairy, shellfish, or different types of seafood. So we do quite a wide panel. But again, if you're really having issues with allergies, you also want to see either a GP who's done additional training in allergy management, or also an immunologist, someone who specializes in allergies. And then they do like the pinprick testing, the desensitization treatments to reduce the allergic response. And then on the sensitivity side of things, it's just an overreaction that's not an immune mediated and isn't life-threatening. So it can just impact how you're feeling, but it doesn't have any negative long-term health consequences other than just how you're feeling.
Would there be certain times that would be better to do these tests over others? Like, let's say if the night before you ate the foods that you think that you're allergic to or have a sensitivity to.
Yep.
And then you had the test the next day. Is it more likely to actually show it than if you were to have, sometimes people are trying to avoid the foods that aren't making them feel well?
That's exactly right. I mean, if you look at celiac, for example, and that's a very good question, you don't want to be when you have your getting tested for celiac disease, you don't really want to have excluded gluten for the last however many years, because then it's very difficult to pick it up. Okay. So to pick it up, a positive response, yes, you'd want to be exposed to what your body is having difficulty reacting with. And what an allergy pretty much is, it's your immune system identifying a protein or identifying a substance as being potentially harmful, and thus tries to fight it out with an immune-mediated response. So it's just a dysregulation of the immune system.
Okay. And so what's an intolerance or what's a sensitivity?
Yeah, I mean, intolerance is something like you have lactose intolerance, where you can't have issues with actually breaking down lactose into its constituents. So you can still, doesn't impact your, like, doesn't cause you any increased risk of certain diseases, but your body can't break it down. And you can do, from a lactose perspective, you can do lactase persistence testing, which is a genetic test to see if you're still producing lactase, which is an enzyme that breaks down lactose. And if that shows up as positive, meaning you still have the enzyme well into adulthood, then it shows that you can tolerate dairy or lactose. Okay. So there's a lot of, it's a super interesting field, and there's a lot of different tests that you can do.
Why do you think, it seems now, compared to even when we grew up, why do you think there's more intolerances or sensitivities? Like lactose intolerance is a pretty common one that people know about. Like as we age, so do those enzymes start to reduce a little bit more, and then we can't break it down as well as what we could when we were kids? Or
yeah, from a dairy perspective, absolutely. That's been shown. From an overall perspective, like a big picture thinking, I think it's multifactorial. It's our lifestyles, the way we process our food, but it's also become more recognized. Like it's well known now that people don't tolerate foods, whereas in the past you may just put it to the side and be like, just eat it, get on with it. Whereas now we're starting to realize we have more education, we're more educated, we have access to more variety of food. Like I myself don't tolerate, so I don't have any allergies, but I am intolerant to gluten and dairy. When I was, when I got sick 15 years, when I was 15, so 20 years ago, the amount of foods that were good quality that I had in my disposal was like very, very, like there was minimal. There was pretty much no good food choice other than fruits, vegetables, legumes, like all thinking about packaged food, for example. I still don't eat much packaged food, but what I would get is I'll go to the gluten-free aisle and buy some, because that was assumed, it was presumed that gluten-free was healthy. Whereas now we are so, like 20 years on, people like myself, people with other intolerances or allergies, there's so much variety and there's so much more acceptance, understanding, and people are more easy to cater. Like when I go to a restaurant now, I said, I don't tolerate this, I don't tolerate that. Then now, okay, well, we'll change this, we'll do that. Whereas 20 years ago, it was like, oh, okay, well, then we just have this salad on the menu and that's all you can get. Whereas I just feel like there's a lot more, people accommodate for these situations, both from a food manufacturing, but also from an overall societal perspective.
And that's the thing, it seems to be so much more common that you do see it around a lot more, which, they've obviously catered to it. And they charge you an arm and a leg extra for it, which even now, like almond milk and all those sort of things, we're trying to like avoid milk. Even that, they still charge you more for it, like when you go to get a coffee or something like that. It's getting a bit ridiculous. But so if I was to be devil's advocate, let's say you've got some foods like the high FODMAPs, or people having symptoms like bloating, discomfort, all that sort of stuff, sensitivities. If there's foods that are more processed and they're technically easier to break down, would that be more beneficial for these types of people?
Yes and no. Short term can be. So if you're having a significant flare if you're having intolerance or reaction or something's not right, then going on a low fiber processed food diet over a short period of time can give your gut some rest. But doing that more than over a couple of days, you start to run into more problems, because all of a sudden you're feeding only one type of gut flora, you're increasing inflammation, it impacts your overall gut lining wall. So doing that short term, but then if you proceed with that, it ends up catching up to you and actually does more damage in the long term.
Because you don't have as much diversity?
Correct. And also the food products, all of a sudden you don't have the fibres anymore. You don't have all the healthy prebiotics. You don't have all the fruits, vegetables, the micronutrients to actually enable or foster a healthy gut environment.
So it's a pretty tricky balance.
It is very tricky. And that's why it's very hard for people to do it on their own. I do think people, I always recommend people, especially when they have gut issues, because there's a lot of variability. And so you need constant iterations on diet, on lifestyle behaviors, that it's important to have someone in your corner who can guide you through that journey.
How long would you typically need to, like if someone was to try to change their diet, how long would you typically need to try to stick to something to see hopefully some reduced discomfort? but then try to see the changes in the microbiome that you can tolerate certain things.
Correct. This is where it gets difficult. It's something that requires at least sort of 6 to 12 months
Wow. Okay.
of ongoing consistency. Otherwise, it's because what you're ultimately trying to do is you're trying to recreate a new environment for your gut that gives you more benefit with less downside. And that takes time because, as I said, you're starting with, especially with some food products, you're starting at very, very low quantities. It takes a very long time to build up that tolerance where you can actually tolerate larger quantities. So it takes time, it takes patience, and the importance of a lot of the gut microbiome stuff. I think I didn't quite get to I forgot. I got a bit excited about the allergy testing before, talking about when to do a gut microbiome test, but then it's also important to repeat it. Like, it's very similar to when we spoke about supplements. Well, if you're implementing something, you want to test it again to make sure that you actually achieve the outcome of interest or what you wanted to do in the first place.
So how often would you, if you were to do a gut test,
Yep.
would you do it 6 months later?
Yeah, 6 to 12 months, depending on the person.
Yeah.
For someone who travels a lot and there is some variability, you might push back doing that test. In terms, like, for example, if you see someone, you do a gut microbiome test, they implement it for 2 or 3 months, and they go overseas for a month, and they're back, and then recommence the initial gut plan, then you might push it back. For if you see them at day 0, and then every single day for 6 months they're consistent, then you could do it at 6 months. So it is a little bit variable.
Next week we're actually talking about genetic testing, and we go through some more of the direct-to-consumer, sort of like fun type genetic testing that you do, versus the medically indicated test. Is there, same for the gut microbiome, is there things that are more medically indicated versus things, because I don't know exactly, but what would be some direct-to-consumer?
There definitely are. There's a variety. Some, they're all pretty similar in the grand scheme of things. I do find the ones that we use, which is behind the our clinician's barrier, if you would say, because it has to be requested by a doctor, is a bit more in-depth and gives me more data, which allows me to improve patients' or clients' health because I can make the data more actionable. Whereas I find some of the smaller direct-to-consumer testing maybe aren't as broad and don't give as much, might have the same it's still a stool test, so they might do the same test, but they don't give you the same report afterwards because it's what are they catering for? They're catering it for the consumer. Whereas if you do one that's behind a doctor or one that's requires a health professional involved, then they're tailoring it for the health professional. So they give more data, more information, and more complexity.
Okay.
So it's important to have that interpretation and implementation rather than just buying it and relying on a couple of insights on a direct-to-consumer gut test, I think.
Because they don't always give you advice on what things to change as
exactly
well.
Right. Because and that's where the art comes in. Like, sometimes when I see certain markers that are very rare, like, yes, that is because of my own personal passion within this field. But when I do a gut microbiome test and there's something that's very rare, like, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, which then requires me to do a literature review after I see that to say, okay, why is this important? What does it mean? What do I do with it? Whereas if you just give that information to a patient or a client directly, rather than having me involved, like the doctor involved, then they're very unlikely to going to do the whole literature review and researching up about that single marker as well. So.
Because there is literally like trillions of gut bacteria, isn't there?
Exactly right. It's quite complicated.
So is there any particular bacterias that you're finding from the gut microbiome test are they common, that are causing common symptoms or anything like that?
I think some common ones we see a lot of causing symptoms. When we see in the right patient cohort are these sulfur and methane producing gut microbiome, gut bugs. That's probably the main ones. And then you again try to manipulate, well, what do they feed on? Can we reduce what substrate they feed on, increase what the other bugs feed on? So you're really trying to manipulate based on the data that you get.
So what sort of things do they typically feed on?
I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest.
Yeah.
I have to, this is too much. I have it's taken me like weeks to create a whole cheat sheet for myself because if you think about a report, I get thousands of gut microbiome species. Then I get between 20 and 50 other biomarkers, whether it's butyrate, whether it's IG3 or whatever it is. Like, there's a massive report. And I wish I was that good at this point in time. I could remember everything off the top of my head, but I just can't.
Oh, don't blame you.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I've seen those reports and I've just
Yeah.
looked at it and gone, that's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it a couple of years ago, and I was like, all right, I've got a steep learning curve ahead of me, because how do you actually use this data? And that's, I think you asked me this the other day. Well, what would other people think of what I'm doing? Or what was your question? It's like, what is my controversial opinion on...
Yeah, what was your controversial opinion on well, in this space, the gut health space?
Yeah, and I think that's that question, because I thought about it and I was like, I think it's people, humans in general, and doctors are humans. If there's something they're not familiar with, or something they don't know the evidence within that field, they're very quick to dismiss it.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas I think the important thing here is you have to foster curiosity and lean into it. We spoke about that in the brain health episode. Whereas I was like, okay, I know like 25 to 50% of this. I have absolutely no idea on the other 50%.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, I really have to upskill. And that's, on me, on my time and my personal time to read up on this. So that regardless of which marker comes up in a patient's report, I know exactly what it means and what to do with it.
It's not something that, like, there's only so much you can learn throughout medical school,
exactly right.
throughout the internship, throughout all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Unless, like you, who has a massive passion in that. What led you to that passion, and what led you to going and researching more of the gut health?
That was obviously because I got inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis. So for me, it was, and luckily I have a gastroenterologist who's very proactive in this space, involved within gut microbiome testing, research within the gut microbiome. So I've got and some people pushing me in the right direction. But again, it was when I was younger, I wish I had that stimulus or that support back then, to be like, yes, you got ulcerative colitis. Yes, we're going to be putting you on medications, but try to do this, change your diet this way. You can remember, although it may not improve overall long-term outcomes, if it can significantly improve your quality of life, which it has, it's allowed me to live a normal life without any impairments, then that's, for me, I think something that's under-recognized. Improving people's gut just for the purpose of quality of life should be equally as important as trying to prevent or reduce or improve health outcomes.
I remember you saying that you tried almost all medications under the sun in terms of the ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease. But you found that the lifestyle changes probably made the biggest change long term?
Correct. I've been quite resistant or refractory to all treatments, whether it's injections, infusions, medications, whatever it is. But I found from a quality of life perspective, lifestyle changes, what I eat, what I do, has probably made the biggest difference from a physical health, from a mental health, from a social health, from all the other pillars. So combining, the medications to reduce my risk of bowel cancer, plus the lifestyle aspect to improve my quality of life, is combining both worlds is just the best possible solution.
Do you find it hard? Do you find it hard to do, like, to go out and eat?
Yeah, I mean, not anymore, because now I just choose where we go or research where we go beforehand, because at the end of the day, I've made the decision long time ago that everything I do, I choose to do. I could be eating whatever I wanted, be eating crap, and then I would feel terrible afterwards. Or I can eat what I know is good for me and I feel great. And I think 15-20 years ago, I made the decision very early to be like, I'd rather feel great for the rest of my life and then be eating or be more strict or more regimented with what I do with my life.
Yeah, that obviously makes a lot of sense. But I feel like a lot of people are their own problem when they make decisions based on, it's a social activity, or Christmas is coming up. It's just silly season. It is
exactly
what it
right.
is.
And that's what I think for me, like, I'm a big advocate for normalizing this. Like, if you have something, speak up. Don't be afraid to be different, especially if it can improve your overall health. Whereas the more I can advocate for people to, I guess, be their own best advocate within their families, friendship groups, the best possible outcome.
When does testing for gut health truly matter?
Yeah, I think, like we mentioned before, and thank you for reminding me of going back to that. So we mentioned, like, if people have symptoms, whether it's gut-specific symptoms, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, or unexplained symptoms, anemia, fatigue, brain fog, whatever it is, and then you go through, what could it be? You sort of rule out, is it pancreatic insufficiency? You rule out, is it celiac? We ruled out the allergies. Then you'd also want to exclude, like, colonoscopy, although it's not a gut health test per self. per se, sorry, especially with the increasing rates of bowel cancer, especially in Australians under the age of 50. And I think Australians now have the highest rates of bowel cancer in under 50-year-olds in the world. I'm
That's
pretty
wild.
sure. It's
Really?
crazy. It's
In the
crazy.
world?
And my point and what I'm going with this is bowel cancer in Australia, or the screening program for bowel cancer, is you have the poo test between 45 and 74, which is what the people are really pushing now. All the guidelines are pushing for more gut tests, more the poo tests, less the colonoscopies. Which, depending on the right person, yes, I mean, from an overall health, they are cheaper, more accessible, but they give you much less data. Plus, a colonoscopy, if you find something during the colonoscopy, you can treat it. Whereas if you have a positive poo test and you have to go through, get a colonoscopy, you then have to get especially going through the public system, you have to wait ages to get the colonoscopy. And then if something is identified, you can remove it. So there's pros and cons of doing poo tests. But where I'm going with this is if we have Australians under the age of 50 with an increasing rate of colon cancer or something like 8 to 9% year on year for quite a while now.
Yeah.
But we're not doing any screening until they hit 45. Like, again, for me, that's like, well, there's a trend going on here. We need to rapidly change what we're doing. Otherwise, there's a lot more younger people. And by that time, they've got families, they've got careers. So it's going to be significantly disrupting the overall health economy and also society. If all of a sudden if you have significantly increased risk of bowel cancer, which then chemo, time off work, impact on family. So that's, for me, something that I'm very passionate about, that you make sure that, yes, you understand the government performs the poo screening, but you really want to make sure that for the right people, you're also offering colonoscopies rather than just relying on the fecal occult blood test, which is a at-home poo testing.
Do you think the colonoscopy should be recommended for people who are 25?
Yeah, for the right person. Like, I started my colonoscopies when I was 15.
Wow.
Like, I've been doing it every second year since. So for the right person, absolutely from a younger age, because you get a direct visualization of what's going on. For some people, maybe you just do the poo test because whether it's resources, whether they don't have private health insurance, whether it's time, based on where they live, they could be super rural and don't have access to an endoscopy unit. So yes, there's definitely pros and cons for both, but I do think you have to make the right decisions based on the individual in front of you, not just saying that, oh, I'm sorry, yes, you may have some issues, but we're not going to do any screening until we're 45. I do have enough faith in the medical society that we do treat the person in front of us. If person needs a colonoscopy or needs something, that's going to get done, and doctors won't wait until they hit 45 to start doing any bowel cancer screening.
But it can also be highly beneficial as a preventative?
Yeah, absolutely. For the right person, absolutely. Because then you can also treat it while you're there. Like, I've had a recent case where someone had some minor risk factors, had a colonoscopy, had an 8-centimeter polyp removed. Like, that's big. Like, it's 8 centimeters.
Yeah.
But again, they probably, unless they had someone who was a bit more proactive and a bit more risk adverse, unlikely to have had a colonoscopy, which is scary. Basically, based on their age. So
why do you think Australians have the highest rates of colon cancer?
Yeah, to be honest, I had a look a while ago, and there's a lot of things going on, whether it's diet, whether it's lifestyle, the environment. But I wish that, and again, we spoke about the genetic, or we'll speak about the genetic testing next week, is like, it's multifactorial. It's not just one thing that's going to be doing it. There's heaps of different things.
Just accumulated factors.
Yep.
Yeah, like there's talks of even just water, like tap water versus filtered water and plastics and
exactly, and that, exactly as you said. I mean, that's sort of that field of research we're still lacking. Like, I know in the States they're quite ahead. Like, you can do blood tests to look for microplastics and pesticides and all that sort of stuff. In Australia, that we're a little bit behind on that aspect, especially for, like, I've had interactions with clients and also friends who were farmers growing up. Like, I was, born up in Copenhagen and then moved to Gold Coast. So I've been in cities most of my life. But if you have someone who was living on a farm using pesticides, is that someone, we should test earlier on because of potential long-term consequences? So it's purely based on what's right for this person. But yeah, the microplastics, the pesticides, and all those sorts of chemicals is where I think we can still improve accessibility to testing in Australia.
What sort of symptoms would you expect for people with?
Yeah, super hard. Like it's super non-specific. It's not like one thing. I mean, for some organic pesticides, could be like neurological issues, but it's very non-specific. You need to take a very good history of all possible exposures, and then have a low threshold for testing, rather than just putting it down to something else.
And dismissing it.
Yeah, exactly
like
right. And that's the point. For me, unless we get data, you'd really want to keep digging unless you we'll get to the root cause of issues.
What do you think is the future of gut health?
Yeah, I
testing?
mean, I think, and to come back to probably finally answer that question about when do we do gut health. So once we've, like the gut microbiome testing, once we've ruled out all other causes and someone's been on, prolonged antibiotics, or they're just having unexplained gastrointestinal symptoms, and you've ruled out the other issues, then that's a perfect person to do a gut microbiome test to see where is there something going on in the gut. Yes, the scientific field is relatively new, but there's still a lot of things we can do. So I do think the future, or where I believe this is going to go, is right now you have cholesterol and glucose, very well understood, very actionable, and I do think we're going to get to that field where you do a gut health and there's going to be big ticket items that everyone's going to know about, and everyone's going to know what to do about them.
So I often hear people talking about the gut-brain axis. For anyone that doesn't know, what is that?
Yep. So it's a two-way axis. So your brain impacts your gut impacts your brain. So it's not just one directional, it's bidirectional. And from a gut to brain perspective, a lot of the precursors to serotonin are produced in the gut, and thus improve brain health, but also your overall mental health can also directly impact your gut. So the gut has its own nervous system in a way.
Yep.
And that can interact with your brain also being a nervous system. So they are bidirectional. And I know people say like does all of your 80% of your serotonin or whatever get produced in your gut. I mean, that number is, I would say there's a majority or a large proportion of your serotonin precursors produced in the gut, but I wouldn't say like that percentage is absolutely certain just yet.
Yep.
And there's definitely a lot more that we'll be learning about in the next couple of decades about how the gut impacts the brain, but also vice versa. But, we could do a full podcast just on that. But in summary, it goes both ways, and what impacts the brain impacts the gut, what impacts the gut impacts the brain.
And like when you say the serotonin, that's typically the neurotransmitter that has more of a calming effect on the system.
Yeah, like from an overall mood perspective, whether it's mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, and also for overall, a sense feeling of happiness, content. So, yeah.
Does that actually, if someone has, let's say they're stressed and they don't know why they're stressed. If someone has issues with their gut, and it might be like the FODMAP type things or the intolerances, sensitivities, could that be caused by the gut itself that's leading to these stress responses or reactivity type responses in the brain?
Good question. I would say that it's a little bit, you have to be very careful when putting down stress just to gut related issues. Definitely can impact, but it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, because if you have stress, that can impact the gut. Like if you're stressed, often people need to go to the toilet or they don't need to go to the toilet. So the stress can impact the gut, but also your overall gut health can either increase or decrease stress. So it goes both ways, and you sort of need to have an appreciation of they're both bidirectional, and it's not just one impacting the other. It can go the other way.
Okay. If you were to pick three things that would create or give you the best bang for your buck for gut health, for a really good gut microbiome, what would be your top three?
First one is diversity in food. So even the 30 and 7 day challenge, 30 plant-based proteins every 7 days, something you can do at home. You start to tick off, and that includes fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and then really trying to tick that off. So diversity would be number one. Number two would be avoiding processed foods, probably, although it's not something to do, it's something not to do.
Yeah.
So processed foods, refined carbohydrates. And then number three would be, avoiding antibiotics is an easy answer, so I'm going to not try to say that one. But that said, what we do gut microbiome testing, people are very fearful of being on antibiotics. But what I've seen, based on personal experience now, is if people have prolonged antibiotics and they do a gut health, it's relatively easy to restore the gut health after prolonged antibiotics. We'll do that one as number 3. So yeah. Antibiotics can significantly disrupt your gut health, but if you get tested, you can rapidly restore your overall gut microbiome.
We're talking about antibiotics as well, like anti-inflammatories, because some people are on anti-inflammatories for, like I've had patients that were on it for like decades and just constant. The doctor was just like, oh, look, you're old, just continue with it. So same again, is that going to have a big effect as what antibiotics do?
Probably not as big. Same with alcohol. Alcohol can also disrupt your gut microbiome. So antibiotics would do the biggest, but yes, they could definitely other things you put into your body can definitely disrupt it.
Okay. And I had a question from actually part of our audience. How much does your gut microbiome, inflammation, etc., in that area, how much can that affect joint pain, like knee pain and back pain?
Good question.
Shoulders, etc.
I mean, it's definitely part of the inflammatory response. We have low-grade inflammation in the brain, wouldn't directly cause like osteoarthritis, but it can, if you reduce the inflammation of your gut and reduce systemic inflammation, then yes, you may be able to reduce inflammation elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think for that one in particular, because that's more so what I was dealing a lot with in clinic, was a lot of osteoarthritic sort of issues that it wasn't just wear and tear, which is, I guess, the old adage of a lot of people tend to think it is just, I used to play rugby and so I just built up that osteoarthritic change, which you can do quicker. But I think the other big part to consider is like how much sleep are you getting? What are you eating, drinking? Like you said, alcohol. I remember asking one patient just to try to reduce the daily beers that he was having because he had essentially a lot of osteoarthritic knee changes, which again, for some people is very normal, but he was so inflamed all the time. And then I asked him just to try to change a little bit of the beer habits that you've got. And he's like, what? Are you kidding? We got to go back to that? You're going to make me like go all organic and everything like that as well? I was like, oh, well, I mean, if you really want the best for yourself, that would be ideal. But anyway, so it's just, I think trying to make those changes as a whole for, whether it's joints, like you said, the chronic low-grade inflammation, all those types of things. We want to try to make sure that, you're looking after yourself from the inside out. Yep,
exactly.
Where would you like to summarize for today?
Was it. 3 takeaways. Plant diversity, remove things, and if you have issues with your gut, anti-inflammatories, antibiotics, then yes, a gut microbiome test can be very useful.
Awesome. Thank you for that. It is a massive topic. Thank you for joining me again, Dr. Seb.
Thank you.
And thank you again for joining the Longev Lens for our gut health episode. Next week, we have our rapid fire with the genetic testing. And then the following week, we're actually having a 3-part discussion based on whole body MRIs, which we're really looking forward to having our first guest. Thank you again.